Lillahi ta'ala, have the good intentions. All right. So we were going over the explanation of Nukhbatul Fikr. As you know, that's the book we're studying here for several months now. And we reached the section on At-Tahammulu wal-Ada, which is the transmission and reception of reports. And we got to Ibn Hajar's talk about Al-Ijazah, which is permission or license to narrate. And then I said, let me review this. And then maybe, insha'Allah ta'ala, we'll repeat. So I looked into the issue and I looked to see what's next. Al-Muttafiq wal-Muftariq and a couple other cases here. And I decided, yeah, let me review and maybe we'll repeat. And there will be benefits, insha'Allah ta'ala. So I said, all right, I have here at my disposal, I took Alfiya al-Iraqi in hadith terminology. So that's more vast than the explanation of Nukhbah. So I started reading in there. And then there is an explanation for this same Alfiya al-Iraqi. Alfiya, the millennial poem of al-Iraqi. It's a 1,000-line poem in hadith terminology, written by al-Iraqi. And he did his own explanation. He did the text and he did the sharh. And then As-Sakhawi, he did an explanation for it too, which is maybe triple the size of the author's explanation. Al-Iraqi, by the way, he's a Shaykh of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. So we've been reading, and I have one display for you on my screen, the explanation of Nukhbatul Fikr by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. And Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, his Shaykh al-Iraqi, one of his sheikhs, he did a 1,000-line poem in hadith terminology. And Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he took that Alfiya and he did his own hadith terminology book, Nukhbatul Fikr, and he explained it. In both, the method is very small and the explanation is comparatively small book, but it's so vast in meaning. So his ability to condense that information is exceptional. Then Ibn Hajar, he transmitted the Alfiya of al-Iraqi to his student, As-Sakhawi. So As-Sakhawi is the student of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, al-Hafiz As-Sakhawi. He explained the Alfiya of al-Iraqi, the Alfiya of Ibn Hajar's Shaykh, with an explanation about 3 times as vast as al-Iraqi's own explanation. I have that. Subhanallah, my last year in university, it was as if Dr. Kamal was trying to tempt me to stay, not to make that my last year. Because he said to us, and he looked at me, next year we're going to be reading As-Sakhawi's explanation. And it was so tempting. But in my mind, I had reasons not to come back. Anyway, so it was originally my idea even to look in there. It's going to be so much information in there. I never got there. So I did start reviewing al-Iraqi's explanation about this same chapter that we read in Nukhbah, since it should have more information, which it does. And then I remembered that I stumbled across once a book that I never heard of. The explanation of al-Iraqi, of the millennial poem of al-Iraqi by Imam As-Suyuti, rahimahullah. As-Suyuti has an explanation of al-Iraqi's millennial poem. So when I saw that, I bought it immediately. And I have my copy here. It's a very nice book, mashallah. And lo and behold, what did As-Suyuti do? As far as I could tell, I didn't give very. I haven't seen otherwise. Let me say it this way. All I can see from what As-Suyuti did is that he summarized Al-Iraqi's explanation. I don't recall seeing anything that's in Suyuti's that's not in Iraqi. For that reason, it crossed my mind even to give this explanation of As-Suyuti, as long as I take the proper time and effort to compare the two books. It's already summarized and the job is done. And then I can just read it. It will be all the information I already took, which it is. Once I got this book, actually, I started studying this book instead of Al-Iraqi's book that we were actually taking. We were taking Al-Iraqi's book, and my secret was that I was studying Suyuti's book, and I was going into all the tests and passing them. Uh, so anyway, when I remembered I have Suyuti's book, I said, let me look in that one. I'll read in there. As far as I know, this is a summary of what's in Iraqi's book. And then I'll look in Iraqi's book and just, you know, use that to check what's in Suyuti's book. That's what I was just now reading quickly as you were gathering. Iraqi's book after reading Suyuti's book. So what I want to do is read for you what I have here, what I reviewed in Suyuti's book. This book is called, according to who published it. So this is published by Dawud ibn Hazm. Dawud ibn Hazm, they just say it's called Sharhu Alfiyat al-Iraqi, the explanation of the millennial poem of Al-Iraqi. No fancy name at all. Ta'lifu Jalaluddin Abd al-Rahman ibn Abi Bakr as-Suyuti. As-Suyuti. I'm trying to remember if Dr. Kamal was aware of the book, because I did show it to him at some point, not immediately. Not that I was hiding it. And I showed it to him, and I remember that he was surprised by it. I told him it has everything I need. I just use it to pass all my tests. So anyway, I'm going to read what he has here. So we're reviewing what we took about Ijazah. So now, if you might happen to have a copy of Alfiyah al-Iraqi, Iraqi's millennial poem in Hadith terminology, the chapter of Ijazah starts, according to the enumeration of this copy in my hand, at line 440. Let me see my copy that I took. What line does it start at? Also, line 440. Now, I'm not going to read the method. As-Suyuti's explanation is a merged one. So he just takes the poem and blends the explanation into it. Al-Iraqi, his own text, what he did was he put the lines of the poem, like how Sheikh Abdullah explains Bughya and other books of his. Sheikh Abdullah's style usually of sharh is what? Takes piece of the text, whole chunk, and then puts explanation, and then whole chunk, and then explanation. That's what Al-Iraqi did. He'll take many lines of his poem and then explain them, then many lines, and then, or numerous lines, a number of lines, and then explain them. As-Suyuti just merged the explanation with the text, and it's Iraqi's own explanation. So I'm also just going to translate directly since this is a review. So the Ijazah, which is the permission, it comes after hearing. It's lower than hearing. It's weaker than hearing. And hearing, like you know already, that could mean you heard from the sheikh or you read to the sheikh. You presented something to the sheikh. That means the sheikh heard you and then verified what you said or read. All of that is hearing. That's superior to an ijazah. Ijazah comes from Jim Wow Zay. Jawaz. Jawaz means permission or permissibility or possibility. So Ijazah, that's the source of the verb ajaza. Ajaza means to permit, to allow, to make possible or to deem possible. So the ijaza is permission. And if you want another word, it basically means license. Because that's what license is, isn't it? License is a permission. And it has 9 types. The highest level of ijaza, without being accompanied with the actual subject of the ijaza, the book that's being permitted, the highest level of permission, without coming along with the book that's the permitted book, yani, without physically handing it over, I mean, is to specify the one who's getting the permission or being permitted, to specify the licensed person and to specify the licensed book. But we're saying here, he didn't just, though, give him a copy. He's specifying which book without giving him a copy. Like to say, أجزت الكتاب الفلاني أو ما اشتمل عليه فهرستي لكم أو لفلان الفلاني. Like to say, I permit, I license uh, such and such book to you, to all of you, or to you in particular, or to all of you, or to so and so, to fulan that I'm talking about, not talking to. Yani. So you might say, I permit book such and such to you, the one I'm talking to, or those whom I'm talking to, or to fulan, the one I'm talking about. So the book is specified and the licensed person is specified. So that's the highest level of ijazah without actually getting a physical copy handed over to you. And some scholars have logged or cited an agreement about this type of ijazah that we're talking about now. That is, they said there's an agreement that you can actually narrate this way. But there is a disagreement about something else. They say there is a disagreement somewhere, but it's not in actually actively reporting by the ijazah. Yeah, so what's left then? You might wonder. What is it then? Practicing it. Narrating it is one thing, and applying it is another thing. And in particular, we're talking about the hadiths here, right? In general, we're talking about like books. Could be books in all kinds of fields. Could be dictionaries. Could be aqidah books or something else. Fiqh, for example, or nahu. But most relevant is actually the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the source. So we're going to practice these hadiths that are narrated this way, or we're just going to narrate them that way without practicing them. So some said there's an agreement to the permissibility of narrating this, even if there's some disagreement beyond the actual issue of narration. And Al-Baji, he denied any difference in opinion absolutely about all types of ijazah. We're still just talking about the first type without regarding handing a physical copy over. Al-Baji denied that there's any difference in opinion about all types of ijazah. Absolutely. And that's a mistake. The difference about narrating by ijazah is confirmed and known. And subhanAllah, I'll tell you something that where I personally find a benefit in ijazah. One of the challenges of narrating by ijazah is to make sure that you're narrating exactly, right? You want to make sure you have all your harakats and everything correct. But what if I'm translating though, and I don't have to tell you the harakats? That makes it easier for me to use ijazah and then translate. So I have a source. Sometimes if I'm using ijazah, I have a source and I'm just translating though, and it's easier for me than sometimes, like now, uh, being sure all my harakat are right. Subhanallah. So no, the difference in opinion about narrating is confirmed and it's known. Narrating by ijazah, I mean, it's confirmed and known. It's a mistake to say it's an absolute agreement that ijazah is permissible and valid. So, and like we said in other lessons, so knowing that this is the case of ijazah, number one, that ijazah is weaker than hearing. Number two, that some scholars, elite ones from the old days, they absolutely debunked ijazah altogether. Then make sure you put ijazah in its proper place. And don't let anyone give people the wrong impression, like he's a scholar or that someone else is some mighty force because he works with an ijazah. Al-Baji said the only difference that's cited is about the permissibility of practicing what is narrated by ijazah, not the permissibility of narrating it itself, the narrating alone. And Ibn Salah rejects that. The Imam of Mustalah, rahimahullah. And he argues that Imam al-Shafi'i himself has two sayings about it. And some of the followers of al-Shafi'i's madhab have rejected it. High-ranking ones, not small fries. Like Judge Hussein, he prevented narration by ijazah, narration, for even talking about practicing. And also the author of Al-Hawi, that's Al-Mawardi. Both of those, Judge Hussein and Al-Mawardi, those are mujtahids in the madhab. He was definitive that ijazah is invalid. They both said, like Imam Shu'bah said, and he's a tabi'i, who also was against ijazah. They said, لو جازت الرواية بالإجازة لبطلت رحلة طلاب السنن. Had narrating by license been valid or permissible, then all of the trips for the students of hadiths would be canceled. Because what's the way that those scholars became scholars? They traveled. They first, according to what's here in the uh, Alfiya of Al-Iraqi, they would start in their own towns and they would exhaust the scholars of their towns. At least that's the best thing to do. And then they move to the next town, and then to the next town, then to the next country, then to the next country. Maybe some of them, of course, skipped some of the sheikhs of their town and went to another country, for example. But the point is that they traveled, for sure. And in the Alfiya of Al-Iraqi, he talks about also, maybe it's in Nukhba, but if so, we didn't get there yet. He talks about also that should you write with big letters or small letters? Not good to write with very small letters unless you have an excuse. Like maybe you're a traveling student or scholar and you need to preserve your paper as much as you can. So you write with little letters. And just compare what's here real quick. Biggest things I have to do to compare these two books is make sure the names are the same. Okay. So he says here, also other scholars, they invalidate Ijazah. They call for the abolishing of Ijazah altogether. Al-Iraqi also cites Abu Shaykh al-Asfahani and Ibrahim al-Harbi, and likewise As-Sijzi. However, permitting license is what their practice has settled upon. Yani, that's the practice, that's the custom of the scholars of hadith. It became that actually nobody debunks ijazah, but it cannot be denied that there is a difference in opinion about it. It's just that that position went extinct. It's not denied though. Most of them validated. Yani, it became that everyone did. And also the obligation of applying what's narrated this way. The majorities, they said that ijazah is valid and applying those types of transmissions is obligatory. And there's another saying that no, it's not obligatory to apply them. Just like if there were a mursal hadith, you know what's mursal hadith? Mursal is when the tabi'i says, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, without mentioning his intermediary. Who's between him and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam from whom he heard? Some said, you don't have to, it's not obligatory to apply ijazah, what's narrated by ijazah. Just like it's not obligatory to apply mursal hadith. But that was refuted. They said there's a difference. The mursal hadith has a reason that we're not going to apply it, according to those who don't apply it, which is the majority. Which is what? There's a disconnection in the chain. And ijazah is not a disconnection in the chain. The second type of ijazah is to specify who's getting the license without specifying what's being licensed. Like to say, أجزت لك أولي فلان جميع مسموعاتي. I give license to you, whom I'm speaking to. Or I give license to Fulan, whom I'm speaking about, to narrate all of what I narrate, all of what I heard, to narrate all of what I heard. So it's not specified. What's that? Is At-Tabari included in there? Is Qurtubi in there? Sahih al-Bukhari is in there? What's that? What's in there? Is Daf'u Shubahi Tashbih in there? Is Asasu Taqdis in there? Most of that I just said is not hadith books though. وهو أيضا, and also the majority of them have accepted narrating this way and practicing this way, practicing what's narrated this way. And we are amongst those. So amongst the sheikhs are those who have permission to narrate all of what Sheikh Abdullah narrates. So what does that include, Yani? So it's open, right? There's obscurity there. So most of them said that's valid too. But the difference in opinion about this type is stronger than the previous type, which I think that's clear for you. We were first talking about a person who's being licensed, being specified, and also the licensed book being specified, but without physically handing over a copy. The majority of them accept this, narration wise and practice wise, application wise. And now we're talking about another case, which is specifying who gets the license without specifying what's being licensed. Also, this one, the majority of them accept it. And the difference in opinion here is still standing, though the majorities have accepted both of these. And the argument against this second type is stronger because of the obscurity that exists in there in what was licensed. Then there's a third type of ijazah, which is non-specification of who's being permitted. Yani, who's the one getting the license? He's not specified. But what's being licensed, it is specified. Or both of them aren't specified. Like to say, أجزت من أدرك عصري أو جميع المسلمين صحيح البخاري أو جميع مروياتي. Like to say, I give license to anyone who's my contemporary, who lived at my time. So that's obscure there. Or like to say, I permit all Muslims to narrate Sahih al-Bukhari. So saying all Muslims doesn't specify anyone in particular. Or to say, I permit any of my contemporaries, or I permit all Muslims to narrate all of what I narrate. Now that's a case that both of them are not specified. When you say all of what I narrate, that's obscure. If you say everyone who's a contemporary of mine, that's obscure too. And so then what's the judgment of this type of ijazah? Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, he was inclined to deem this also permissible narration, as well as Ibn Mandah and Abu al-Ala al-Hamadani, or al-Hamadani is put here with that. Let me see what's in my copy. Al-Hamadani is how I took it in my copy here. And this one that I purchased says Al-Hamadani with a thal. So I don't know if both ways are valid or if with a thal is a mistake. For sure, Hamadani is correct. This copy here, this Suyuti, it does have typos in it. A number of them. So also Abu al-Ala al-Hamadani, who came after them, he also deemed it permissible. And one of the scholars, he was a little bit more detailed. He said, if the one who's included in this vague description is actually present, so he says, whoever was a contemporary of mine, so it's vague, but someone who's a contemporary of his is really there. He says, if he's there when the ijazah is given, then that's valid. So says Qadi Judge Abu Tayyib al-Tabari. But Sheikh Ibn al-Salah, he leans towards abolishing that. Fahdar. So be warned. That's what's in Al-Iraqi's poem. Fahdar. Yani, be on alert. And Ibn al-Salah's argument here is that ijazah is already weak. So if you do it this way, it's going to be weaker and weaker. And it's not appropriate to commit to this amount of weakness. However, An-Nawawi, he validates this. He says this is permissible. And even if there is some general words, so there is some obscurity in who's being licensed, but it still is qualified to a degree. Like, I give permission to the scholars who are on the borders, the scholars who are on the borders, the open border, who defend the borders. So it's open, but still is qualified to a degree. Or if he says, I give permission to anyone who read on me previously. So it's open, but it is qualified to a degree, then that's more likely to be permissible because of the qualification that's in there. And Al-Iraqi says, Judge Iyad said in Al-Ilma', I don't reckon that there's a difference amongst them about this type of ijazah for anyone who deems ijazah permissible. Judge Iyad, the Maliki, he says, I don't reckon that anyone who deems ijazah permissible deems this type of ijazah impermissible because it does have some amount of qualification in it. So it would be like saying, I give license to the children of Fulan, or I give license to the brothers of Fulan. And if the description is not limited, is not qualified, then like to say, I give permission to all the people of the town. Then it becomes like general, an absolutely general permission. Yani, that's the talk of Judge Rial. Let's stop there. That's a little bit brief, but it's good. Yani, it went smooth. I was afraid it wasn't going to. And then that's going to give me time to just review more, inshallah. And next week we'll continue like this. So let's, inshallah, since we're here, let's cover ijazah well. Make sure we understand it very well, inshallah ta'ala. And then we'll move on in the nukhbah, inshallah. Who are the scholars who are on the borders? Yani, if there were borders, means the borders of between countries. Like, for example, did you hear about Al-Awza'i? That he came and he just settled at the seashore so he could watch out for in case there's an invasion. He was a scholar. Rahimahullah. That went well, mashallah. And I understood now much better too. Subhanallah. That's a lesson for me. If Allah doesn't will for you to understand something, you're not going to understand it. Because I read all of this before. More than once even. And every time I read this, I'm saying to myself, it's not giving me a lot of information. Subhanallah. It looked like I was looking for something I didn't find. Anyway, if there's no other question, then let's stop here. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك